Good evening once again to the Marty Heiser Show, where you always get the truth and we talk about interesting issues of the day. Today's issue is going to be the economy and what just happened in Washington with these new taxes that are being put in place. Did we go off the fiscal cliff? Was there ever a fiscal cliff, or was this one of those bait and switch that we get out of Washington? What exactly is the American Taxpayer Relief Act? Sounds vaguely patriotic, something everyone can vote for, but what just happened? When I get my paycheck in 2 weeks, is there going to be less money in it, or is there going to be more money in it? Finally, are the rich getting taxed enough so everything's going to be fair? Is everyone paying their fair share now? Are brighter days ahead, or are we headed towards some sort of a Greek country-based socialist oblivion? These are questions that we're going to be talking about. Quickly, though, before we get to that, it's something that I'm sure is on everybody's heart, and I don't mean to extend the anguish or try to, somehow get emotional value, but I just want to say a word to the families involved and the extended community in Newtown and Sandy Hook, and just to say that I know the TV cameras have left. It seems like the circus has kind of left town. But as a community, you need to know that everyone has you in their thoughts and their prayers, that people are doing whatever they can to make sure that something like this never happens again. Families and extended families, even people that weren't directly affected, with the kids asking questions now, going through what had to be an incredibly difficult holiday season. I just want to say that there's going to be, that basically the extended community is still here. They're here for you, even though the circus has left town. I know that houses of faith are open. The church I attend is ministering to these families. And we just want you to know we haven't forgotten. We're not going to forget. And we just want to live with you, if you will, through these very difficult times. And our heart goes out to you, and our prayers are with you. And you're not alone. We're doing this together. So I want to thank you again for joining the Marty Heiser Show. I hope you enjoy it. You know, we come to you absolutely free. You don't even got to pay for this stuff. It comes absolutely free, and no one on this panel makes any money, which you may think is a good idea. Okay, tonight's topic, the economy, taxes, what's happening. I have some vague ideas, but luckily for us, we have Michael Actus Grandi, who's joining us once again. You, of course, are the CPA firm in Danbury, Connecticut. You are well versed in these things. You know how it affects the man on the street, let alone Wall Street, right down to Main Street. And we're also joined by Professor Jim Bolano, who's going to give us some context, and a guy that is a dear friend of mine, Larry Ditkoff, and he basically went to a Ivy League school. So he's wicked smart. And he also is involved in investments as well. And you have a handle on some of this as well from maybe a little bit different perspective than me. Sure. That all said, what are we talking about tonight? Did we go over the fiscal cliff? Didn't we? What just happened, and is everything going to be okay?
Well, I don't know about whether everything's going to be okay. What we did we go over the fiscal cliff? Well, stay tuned, because while we took care of the tax side of the equation, of course.
Everyone's paying their fair share now?
Of course, we didn't.
We socked it to those dastardly rich guys?
We didn't take care of the spending side. So I guess as far as the spending side goes, stay tuned. Okay. We'll have to see what happens. I guess conceivably, everything I'm going to be discussing tonight, at least on the tax side, could be unwound in a new budget deal, particularly if they can't agree on spending, et cetera. So it could be a blank page all over again. I don't think so. I think what we're seeing here on the tax side is probably going to stick, but we'll get into it as the night progresses here.
Okay, well, give us an overview. What did just happen? And by the way, Larry, if you want to jump in, or Jim, if you have questions, we look to you as a guy that deals with these, that crunches the numbers. We're off, at the McDonald's drive-thru figuring out what we're going to eat. What did just happen?
Well, basically what happened here is that taxes essentially stayed the same for 98% of tax-paying Americans. At least the income tax stayed the same for 98% of tax-paying Americans.
So Bush tax cuts continued?
Bush tax cuts continued for the 98%.
Right.
Now, but that 2%.
What's the income level of the 2% that we're talking about?
Well, for starters, what we did is the following. If your taxable income, and that's after deductions,
Right.
exceeds $450,000 and you're a married couple,
Okay.
what will happen is there is a new rate bracket.
Okay.
We now create a 39.6 rate bracket, which is essentially what existed prior to the Bush tax cuts.
Okay, so combined incomes of $450,000 or above, you're going to get dinged.
Right. Now remember, that's taxable income. That's after deductions for things like state income tax, property taxes, charitable contributions. All right?
College tuition for your children?
Well, at that income level, you're not getting those benefits.
Really?
At the lower income level, you're getting the benefits. You're still going to get those benefits. That's been maintained.
Okay.
That's been maintained. Now, the other thing that was done is for incomes above $300,000 for married individuals and $250,000 for singles,
Right.
there is a phase out of itemized deductions and exemptions. So that, for example, if your income is $400,000, if a married couple has $400,000 of income,
Right.
they are going to lose $3,000 of their deductions. At that bracket, that's probably got about a $1,000 income tax effect.
Okay. Okay.
The real pronounced effect is, of course, at the higher levels of income. Now,
Right.
what also happened is the temporary Social Security tax cut, which was in effect for a couple of years,
Right.
has now been rescinded.
And that was 2%?
That was 2%.
Okay,
That was
okay.
2%.
So that means less cash in people's paychecks.
That means that 163 million working Americans, effective the beginning of this month,
Right.
are going to get a tax increase in their paycheck.
Wow.
But can't we say just for a moment that that's a good thing because that tax funds the Social Security system?
Well-
and Social Security system, like Medicare, is heading towards insolvency. So therefore, it's a responsible move.
In fact, Jim, you can make an argument that those cuts probably shouldn't have been enacted in 11 and 12, but the need was to stimulate the economy. The reality of it is those cuts were paid for with borrowed money, and it's going to have to be paid back. So
Now, big picture macroeconomics, the idea is, okay, the government needs to get more revenue, but the idea is in a down economy or a flat economy, when you're trying to prime the pump for the economy, the last thing you want to do is siphon cash out of the economy.
Exactly.
And all these tax increases or the increases, that's exactly what that's doing, is taking money out of circulation that people can use to have their house painted or invest or do what have you.
Well, and we'll get into a little bit of
Okay.
that. Let me give you this graphic in terms of what the effect was. When I was on in July, Marty,
Yes, I remembered. I watched that show.
we did a graphic basically then showing what the effect of what might happen if the Bush tax cuts expired.
Right, which
they
did not happen.
Which for 98% that did not happen.
Right, okay.
As a result, this is the impact, and what you can see is a single individual earning $40,000, married couple earning $75,000,
Right.
the married couple with 2 children under 18.
Right.
You can see that on the income tax side, there has been no change. There has been no change. Now, however, you see the effect of the increase in the Social Security tax from the payroll tax cut. Here, for the single individual, it's increased his tax liability $800, and for the married couple, $1,500.
Oh, okay. So that is a bit of a bite.
Now, Jim, to your point, the budget office, I believe, is estimating that it's going to raise about $115 billion as a result of that action
For
alone.
Social Security.
Correct, Larry. Correct, Larry. Just on the Social Security piece. Now, the more interesting effect
Yes.
is on our hypothetical Fairfield County executive
Yes.
with a salary and bonus of $1 million and with $100,000 of long-term capital gains and $150,000 of dividend income.
Larry calls them his peeps from around the way.
Guys I work with, Marty.
Exactly. These are your guys. This is what puts, gasoline in the Porsche. Go ahead.
That individual in 2012 would have paid tax at $289,000.
Okay.
All right. Now, as a result of the increases, The increase in the rate from 35 to 39.6% for openers.
That's
also,
above salary or income over 450,000.
Taxable income over 450.
Okay.
Now, the other impact here was the effect on dividend income and long-term capital gains.
Right.
Long-term capital gains, maximum tax of 20%.
Okay, and that was 15%.
That was 15%.
That's what they were hammering Romney on.
That's
you
correct.
only paid 15%.
Well,
that's Warren Buffett going around. My secretary pays more in taxes. 13, or well, between 13 and 15% is what you pay on tax on capital gains income.
Well, 15 is on long-term capital gains, and of course you have to take into account the impact of alternative minimum tax. It may actually be higher.
All right, but I mean that's where that number came from, and they're bumping that up.
That is good. That goes to 20%. Now that's under the expiration of the Bush cuts, it would have gone to 20%. Anyway.
Right.
The difference is they applied the 20% only to the income level above 450.
Okay.
Now, they kept a very interesting provision. If you have an individual, take the example of our individual.
Yes.
Our single individual there with 40,000,
right.
And even our married couple at 75. If they generated long-term capital gains,
right,
or they had so-called qualified income, their tax on those gains and that income would have been zero.
Really? Why is that?
And it will still be zero. Because when Congress passed the favorable rate for long-term capital gains and qualified dividends,
right,
they stipulated that if you're in a 10 or 15% tax bracket, the actual rate on those gains should be zero. So you can say that for certain individuals, there is actually a zero long-term capital gain and qualified dividend rate.
But isn't that good for the economy? Isn't that good? Don't we want people investing money? Don't we want people? I mean, if they, for example, you take that money and you're investing it in say, some startup company, like 15 years ago you decided to invest it in Google or whatever the big growth company is. You put that money, you put it to work, it generates the economy, it generates employment, and if you lose it all, tough, bunnies, don't worry about it. But if you make the money, and then the government wants the money.
Well, Marty, if I can interject just for a moment, I think one of the things you're doing, you're looking at tax policy in a piecemeal fashion. And I think you have to look at it in its totality. That and let's put aside for the moment what the appropriate size of government should be.
All right.
But whatever it is, whatever the size should be, there has to be some sort of process to generate the funds that the government needs to operate itself, and that has to be evaluated in totality. So it's not so much, at least I think, about fair share, or is this particular tax appropriate? Is the AMT appropriate? Is the capital gains tax appropriate? What should the exact rate be?
But this isn't a left or right thing right now. But correct me if I'm wrong. But right now we're borrowing 42 to 46 cents out of every dollar that we spend anyways. Is that correct?
Well, it's like 1.1 trillion.
2.2 trillion raised versus 3.6 trillion
I think it's more than two. It's more than
okay.
2.2.
So this idea like we have to tax appropriately to what we're spending. I mean, you couldn't run your personal budget that way, could you?
No, Marty. But is that an appropriate comparison? For example, you know what? I have an idea. The guys who come back from Iraq and guys who come back from Afghanistan who have all these terrible injuries. Yeah. Screw them. Let's not take care of them at the VA.
But that's ridiculous hyperbole. You're taking fiscal policy and you're comparing it to taking care of veterans. This country is taking care of veterans for over 2 years. That's ridiculous.
That's the zero-sum.
You're an Ivy League grad.
Zero-sum politics.
Jimmy, you got to let me respond. If Marty's going to go off on the ad hominem
you're going off
attack.
On wounded veterans that aren't going to get paid.
Marty, the point I'm trying to make is that there are certain things individuals can choose not to do. There are things that a government cannot choose not to do. That's the point I'm making to you.
Like defend the borders, deliver the mail.
Yeah. Amongst other things.
Do you think? With 50 million people on food stamps, there's maybe a few goodies out there that we could curtail?
You know, Marty. Yeah, and we can get to the entitlement discussion later, or we can do it now if you like. But yeah, you know, there's always people who game a particular system. But when you look at, say, you know, I'll pick on Halliburton. You know, you look at the contracts that they got in, you know, Iraq, which were no bid, and you think of the billions and billions of dollars that were wasted over there. You don't really see a lot of criticism coming from a lot of people who are more of the conservative bent in that regard. It's always, yes, there's the woman who has the 8 children and she doesn't work and she gets a bigger check because she has more children.
You're saying we're not running our finances well, but you guys did it too. Is that essentially it?
I don't know what you're saying.
You're saying that I didn't criticize Halliburton, ergo I have no authority to criticize what's going on now.
Well, I mean, it smacks a little bit
of hypocrisy.
Marty, what are you, a married couple? You're finishing my sentences here?
Marty, he's getting to a point, though, in that everybody's guilty here in a way.
Okay.
What happened when it might have been more responsible to go over the fiscal cliff. Everybody would have paid their fair share. Sequestration would have taken on cuts. It might have been too drastic, but it would have been more towards handling the deficit. But what happened when they so-called fixed the fiscal cliff? Wall Street went up. Well, what is that all about?
They got all kinds of sugar daddies.
They're all tied in. Yeah. Corporations are tied in. Yeah. The welfare state is tied in.
Didn't Hollywood get a bunch of money in this?
Of course, they all did. And of course, they couldn't pass the fiscal cliff without pork in it. How serious was it? I mean,
no, it wasn't. Well,
it's hypocrisy.
I think it's expediency that, you know, Obama certainly had campaigned on, you know, not having the rates go up for the 98%. I think the Republicans didn't want to look like bad guys. You know, they gave in a little bit on the, you know, there were higher taxes at higher rate, at higher income levels, not 250 but 450. But also there was a bigger death tax exclusion than, you know, the president originally wanted to give. So there was, you know, there was a give and take there, but the issue of, you know, spending cuts was essentially kicked down the road, but only for a 2-month period. And, you know, Michael was saying, you know.
So are we rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic here? Are we taking on water and this is all going to come to some cataclysmic end? Or basically has this country been running a deficit for as long as can? As long as since Bill Clinton has no longer been president. Don't worry about it. No, we had debt then. We just didn't have.
You said deficit.
Okay, you're right. I stand corrected. But we've had you know, nationwide debt for years, and I think it's a little higher than usual, but everything's going to be okay.
A lot higher.
Our national debt in 1990 was about 52% of GDP. It's now over 100%.
Not 100%.
About 100%, slightly over 100% in a matter of 20 years.
Yeah, that just so we're clear, that's the debt, the cumulative debt, not to be confused with the deficit.
Yes,
the 16.3
which right now, what is our deficit percentage-wise? Compare those two, 1990 and now, if you happen to have it at the.
I don't have it at my fingertips.
While you're thinking of that, if you want to call in, the phone number is up on the screen, 438-2003. If we're wrong here, if you'd like to have some specific questions, please call in. This is interactive. Don't hesitate to call.
You know, Marty,
438-2003. Yes.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I had a specific question for Michael.
Yes.
And this relates to me personally, so I wonder if you could.
Well, go ahead.
I saw on one of the sheets you mentioned the exemption for the alternative minimum tax is being bumped up, $51,800 for
singles,
for individuals. Was there, you know, in previous years, that was the maximum you could take, but if you had a higher than a certain level, there was a slide.
There was a phase out.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Is that not the case now?
Phase out's alive and well. Phase out still exists.
Okay. All right.
Is that a bad thing for you, Larry?
Well, what happens is, to Larry's point, if you have significant capital gains, for example, yes, you get the benefit of the favorable rate.
But then you give it back in the.
But it has a way because that phase out on the exemption is based on income, all income, regardless of its character.
Correct.
Whether it's capital gain or ordinary income or dividend, et cetera.
Wow.
It has a way of pushing you into the AMT. Now,
That's fun for Larry because he's a very astute investor.
But the irony,
he has picked some stocks you can't believe. This guy's
Yeah.
washing money.
the
I
irony.
picked some stocks I can't believe. That's very true, Marty.
That oversized driver from Switzerland, I think that was one of the winners.
The electric fork you invested in?
That was me. That was me.
How about the soft tissue X-ray machine? How'd that work out? Anyways, go ahead.
What's interesting is in the illustration I ran for the
More charts. I love it.
for the Fairfield County exec here.
Yes.
This
This guy's
individual.
not buying a new Porsche. Is he?
Well, he's.
Can he afford to have his house painted?
Well,
Can he
here's the
make a
deal. He's
determination
going to
on
owe another $40,000 in individual income tax.
That'll paint
all
your
right?
house.
All right. Now, but wait, there's more. What he's affected by, of course, the reversal of the payroll tax cut extension. That's going to cost him another $2,300.
Right.
Then we have the effect, which has nothing to do with the fiscal cliff legislation, because this was passed with the Health Care Act.
Right.
We have the Medicare surtax on his earnings.
Ouch.
Since he
Now,
earns,
is that Obamacare, basically?
it's going to help fund it. Since he earns more than $250,000, at 0.9% above that amount, he will pay another $6,750 on his earnings.
No maximum amount?
No maximum amount.
Okay.
And then, because he has investment income of $150,000, he is going to pay a 3.8% supplemental tax on his investment income. So all in, our hypothetical executive is going to pay an additional $55,000 in tax in 2013. Wow. Now, maybe if he was planning on having his house painted, well,
Going to put it off.
maybe he's going to put it off
A lot of people
a year.
have been doing that. Don't ask me how I know, but I know.
That's why for 23.8 on capital gains, that includes the
That has
20% and the 3.8.
Well, Larry, the irony here is that because also of the phase-out of deductions that takes place here,
Right.
this individual lost $25,000 of his itemized deductions.
Right.
Because his income was about $850,000 above the threshold.
Okay.
So as a result, the loss of those deductions actually created a scenario. And he lost all his exemptions also, by the way.
Okay.
Those got phased out too.
Okay.
So the irony of it was, with those phase-outs at the higher rates, he's actually not paying an AMT, whereas previously he might have. So he's not paying an AMT, an alternative minimum tax.
Minimum tax.
We have parallel tax systems
For those
in
of
this
you that
country.
don't crunch numbers for a living.
We have parallel tax systems in this country. You compute your tax two ways.
Yeah.
You pay the tax on the higher base.
All right. Now, from a purely political point of view, wasn't this $1 million baby here really living high off the hog, wasn't paying his fair share, benefiting from the working people, and isn't this long overdue that he pony up this money?
This is the first tax increase. First tax increase we've had since, I believe, 1994. So almost 18 years.
There was a headline, someone in Ridgefield said that the current administration is spending like socialists but taxing like
Libertarians.
Libertarians,
Yeah.
yeah.
So is this a correction that's long overdue? Were tax rates much higher during the Clinton years, and that's where we ran a surplus? Weren't tax rates something comparable during the bygone Reagan era, which conservatives hold up to be, you know, the ideal of ideals? Is this much to do about nothing, or are we all really in big trouble?
I think time will tell here. We don't know. We do know, we have been told this, that the payroll tax cut repeal.
Right. That's at 2% of Social
That's the
Security?
2%.
Right.
Will
That's
probably
gonna
drop.
hit the butcher, baker,
Well,
and candlestick maker. Forget about the $1 million Porsche guy.
The prediction is it will probably drag GDP down by about 1 to 1.5%.
Does that do anything to unemployment, which is still hovering around 8%?
Well, those benefits, of course, have been extended. They have been.
How many weeks is that?
I think we're back to the 90. I think we're
99.
back to the 99.
99
We're back to the
And that
99.
was part of
weeks.
this?
That was part of this. That was part of this.
All right.
But Higa, you talked about governing like a socialist and taxing like a libertarian, which is really true. In Europe, we're always accusing Obama and the Democrats of being, Euro socialists. But in Europe, they have this huge social safety net, but they pay for it. Their taxes are huge over there. They get hit with it and they actually pay for it. Here, we're offering this social net, and it's a piecemeal social net. It's, the veterans, the children, this. It's just zero-sum politics that they're playing in Washington. And at the end of the day, we're not paying for it.
Yeah.
Under the Clinton tax years, everyone paid higher taxes, not just this niche of the top 2%.
No, that's true.
Yeah. So you have, whatever it was, 47% of Americans don't pay income taxes. Yes, they pay Social Security, we know that. But we're not funding this, leviathan of government. You're borrowing $1.2 trillion a year. You just raised $40 billion.
I think you're right.
The project.
I also want to point out that
you raised about $100 billion from the payroll tax cut repeal.
But that's supposed to be for what it's supposed to be.
I agree.
So on the income tax side, you raised like $40 billion.
And what did we just do for Sandy relief? Didn't we just cut a check for $60 billion?
Maybe it was $60 billion.
Yeah.
So that's going to Sandy.
So that's gone.
Oh, and we're going to invest in infrastructure and education and worker training. You forgot about all that. It's a joke, Larry.
Well, you go through something, then you turn to me. There was if you look historically,
at the end of the day, we're all Americans here. The election's over.
I understand
we're just looking at these numbers, and it just doesn't seem to add up.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, if you look historically at investment in infrastructure and recession, I wish I had data here. I read it in The Economist, that when the country spends more on, if you will, investment in infrastructure, in education, in
dare I say shovel-ready jobs?
Say what you want, Marty. It's your show.
Okay.
But that economic growth is usually substantially better. And one of the problems, and I think Michael will side with me on this one, that people need to differentiate between expenses and investments. In accounting terms, and I'm a CPA as well, a capital investment is not expense in its particular year. It's capitalized and it's amortized.
Let's take it down to your personal budget. If you buy a house, it's not like you're just spending money on a house. You're
you have a benefit,
capital asset,
right? You have a benefit
theoretically appreciates.
No, I'm not talking about that. No, I'm not talking about appreciating from an investment. That's not what I'm talking about. Let's take a car then, because that will not appreciate as an investment unless it's a vintage car. But if you say, well, I spent whatever $25,000 on a car, that's an expense of that year. But if you're going to use it over, people use cars for 7 years, 8 years, then it's really, what's it, $3,500, $4,000 a year.
Question?
So you can't necessarily look at an expenditure.
Okay, hold on one second.
And you have to need to differentiate an expenditure and an expense. By the way, you usually tell me to land the plane. Now you're telling me.
Now I'm telling you to take the plane around for another lap. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that's something that needs to be considered when evaluating, when evaluating a budget in general.
All right.
And infrastructure spending has positive impacts down the road as opposed to just an expense, like food stamps.
Well, we do have a gas tax. That's a gas tax, federal gasoline tax. That's supposed to fund
Great.
That.
All right, caller, you have a comment. Please chime in here. Help us. Give us some direction.
How you doing, Marty?
Good.
Jesus is the Lord. And listen, I just want to tell you guys, I've been a Republican most of my life. I've never been a Democrat, and but I'm gonna drop out of the Republican Party after the Republicans caved in on the fiscal cliff. And this whole thing is a framed argument, just like last year, and they caved in on the debt, and they're going to cave in again. They'll cave in on gun control. And what we're really talking about is the Constitution. We talk about all these people, they need this, they need that. The progressive income tax, this whole debate about who should be taxed, how much, over 200,000, over 450,000, over $1 million, whatever it is, it's all a lie. It's a framed argument. The Constitution, as unconstitutional as the income tax was, it was passed in the Constitution. But a progressive income tax is right out of the Communist Manifesto, and that's what they need. They need to punish people who make more money, or in other words, they adjust the taxes based on what you make, and that, of course, is all unconstitutional. The whole thing, the way our tax structure is, the entire basis for most of the taxes that we pay is also unconstitutional. So, you know, I just get very upset when I hear, you know, everybody gets into all the particulars of all this stuff, and we lose the basic argument of what the Constitution says.
Now you pay
about
your
all this stuff about this. We have to make the schools safe. What about the fact that the schools weren't even safe in the first place because the government made it a gun-free zone where somebody can go in there and no one can protect themselves. After 9/11, what happened? They put the pilots are now carrying guns. It was the government who made it illegal to have guns on the plane for pilots in the first place. We have all these problems. I'm sorry. I'm going to talk, Marty.
All right, no, I appreciate your input. I have a question for you.
I'm sorry.
You do pay your taxes. I mean, sometimes guys can get a little
carried. Taxes. I'm not arguing with that.
Okay, all right, good. Because I would continue to do that because there are folks that have this, hey, the income tax is unconstitutional, not constitutional. Show me in the Constitution, and they usually end up in jail for not paying taxes, like Wesley Snipes and stuff like that. So
I'm not saying that, but it's interesting you would say that. That almost sounds like a veiled threat.
No, not at all, not at all.
United States Constitution.
No, not at all.
The income tax was passed. Albeit, however, it was passed. I recognize that we have an income tax, and the government does have a right in the Constitution to tax. But a progressive income tax is not constitutional, even according to the 16th Amendment.
So this $1 million guy we're looking at tonight should pay the exact same amount, percentage of his income in tax as the guy making $40,000 a year, from your perspective.
Is absolutely correct.
Okay, and that's constitutionally based, is what you're saying.
Well, he's advocating for value-added tax.
Of the law. But let me just tell you one thing. When you're talking about what happens with the rich, and I understand your concern, and mine too. What you're talking about, the reason why the whole thing is corrupt, the Internal Revenue Code favors the rich in the first place. For example, GE, what was it, a few years ago, it was reported they paid no income tax. They made $8 billion and they paid no income tax.
Yeah.
Well, that's because the corporate lobbies have all these tax loopholes in the first place.
Yeah.
But the point is, the whole thing is ridiculous. If you would just get back to the way it's supposed to be, there wouldn't be any corporate tax loopholes. There wouldn't be any loopholes and lobbyists.
I agree with that.
Lawyers. You would have people paying, just like they do on property tax, you would have paid as a percentage of what you own. Now that we have an income tax, it would be a percentage of what you make.
All right. My closing thought is stay in the Republican Party. There's only like 4 of us left in the state of Connecticut. So if you leave, we're down to 3. We don't even have enough for bridge anymore.
I understand, Marty. I understand. What am I supposed to do when the same thing goes on all the time? We just keep turning against the guys that are making. Ron Paul made terrific arguments. There's a lot of guys that are very constitutional. I should say a few guys in the whole, federal government. And
call me back. I want to get you on the. I want to get you on the show.
We keep caving.
I know. We should all move to Texas.
Just be a loser?
No, I don't know. We'll go down swinging. All right. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean, don't forget, I can still vote for a Republican.
That's true. That's true. All right.
To be in the party.
All right. Thank you. All right. Appreciate the call.
Yeah. Well, Gerald.
All right. I mean. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, now here's
Unravel
I'll make
what
a
he
comment.
does.
Yeah.
Well, let me make one comment.
GE doesn't pay a penny.
Yeah,
they're shipping jobs over to
Boeing.
China. They're building more cars.
I just want to make a
more
point.
Machines in China.
I'd like to make a point about the progressive.
Give me some hope here.
I'd like to make
a
point. I don't know if you're beyond hope, Marty, but I'll try the best I can. Just an argument or a point about the progressive income tax, and I know I've mentioned this to you before. I don't know if I've mentioned it on the show. But the rationale behind it is that people at lower income levels need a greater portion of their income to live, to meet basic needs. And that's why the income tax is progressive. I mean, that's the rationale behind it.
You could fix that with a low flat tax. They'd have more of their income. You just
want more people. Lower flat tax. Well, no, not value-added tax. So how about lower flat tax, but with an exemption? Lower flat tax with an exemption.
For things.
Then you can do that. But then there would be an exemption.
Let's let the pro answer this. This is amateur hour. What do we need to do? We look to you for guidance.
Well, if you're going to go with a flat tax, all right, and the theory is it's more consumption-based, you're taxing basically, you're rewarding savings is essentially what's happening. yes, you'd have to put in certain exemptions for things like food, basic necessities. Larry, your point about progressive tax is true. That if you look at first world societies, if you look at countries in the OECD, for example, et cetera, they have progressive. They have progressive structures.
Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development.
A club for rich countries.
Is this like the top 20?
I've mentioned them on the show, Marty.
Okay, I just I get a little lost in the alphabet soup, but go ahead.
A good argument for a flat tax is that one of the problems with a progressive system is that as individuals begin to turn the corner financially, they creep into higher brackets and pay a greater share of tax and dribble down back to where they were. So the trick, perhaps, maybe the right answer in a progressive system is to find the right balance so that individuals don't end up in that scenario where they can maintain some wealth and basically spend more.
You cross the margin and slip right back.
Well, wouldn't indexing be the answer to that?
Which you have a little bit right now, but that would certainly be a way. That would be one suggestion in that direction. Yes.
Is tax reform sort of like alternative energy that everyone talks about and says, we should run our cars on windmills and that would be great, and everyone nods their head, yes, that would be great. And then tax reform, everyone says, oh, we need to simplify the tax code. It's this big, it needs to be simplified.
Simplification,
but it's just never going to happen.
Simplification, I'm afraid, is just a 14-letter word.
Okay. So it's not going to happen? I mean, I want you CPAs to still be gainfully employed.
I've been practicing for almost 40 years, and I've heard this talk when I was 22. And I have yet to see it.
I mean, this what do we call it? The American Taxpayer Relief Act. This is a classic example of everyone's getting their hands in the pie. Hollywood's got a little bit. The alternative fuel guys got a little bit. The Wall Street couldn't be happier about this whole thing. And everyone's got their lobbyists. Everyone's got their, the forming it. The devil's in the details. They all got their hands in it. And you come out and you get this kind of. Here's the casserole. Hope everyone's happy. Let's.
Well, it's why something like 83% of Americans need help on completing their income taxes.
Okay, so it's just going to stay this complicated mess. The fact that we're building up this incredible debt and incredible deficit, it's not really that big a deal. Politically, the Republicans make hay out of it, but hey, live free, eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow we're going to be gone anywhere.
Marty, does anybody say that? Does anybody say that?
Well, basically, yeah. I mean, basically, we just had an election. Democrats got reelected.
Is that what the Democrats say? Is that what the president?
That's not what they say, but that's the reality of our situation here. I'm not. It might be right. It might be like everything's okay.
No, I'd have to take issue with you that it's the reality of the situation. The president. He's been out for cuts. He's added, and again, I don't have the specific.
You're saying that the current president of the United States is in favor of cutting? Can you give me one example?
U.S. out of Iraq.
Okay. Great. I'm all for ending all these wars. I'm all for saving money in the military. But I just 60% of every dollar is these entitlement programs, and far from cutting. The minute you mention cutting, the video is made of that
at the 47%.
No, not that big. That's another one. That's a surreptitious video. But the video is made of the guy, pushing the old lady off the cliff in the wheelchair.
Oh, that one.
And how can you dare cut anything?
Well, Marty, I'd like to. You probably heard that the president nominated Jacob Lew to take over for Tim Geithner.
Yeah, he's got a really awkward signature, and it's going to be on all our dollars.
Apparently, he has a weird signature. But putting that aside, He's a pretty tough negotiator, from what I understand. And he's gonna. It's gonna. We have 2 months until the sequestration rears its ugly head again. Well, now a month and a half. Till the month and 2/3 till the sequestration.
So he's going to try and get cuts in place and get things under control.
I don't know. I don't know how much he's going to give.
He's going to push. They're going to push military cuts from the administration side. They're going to say, "Don't touch the social safety net." That's going to be their play. Republicans will take the opposite view. and of course.
Can we get something done?
Look at
Can we go?
nothing.
Can we raise the retirement age from 65 to 67? Can we do that?
I think that's inevitable.
Starting from people 45 or below, that's what Romney was talking about.
I think an increase in the retirement age for Social Security is inevitable.
Absolutely.
Well, why hasn't that been done yet? I'll tell you why. Because the minute you mention it, you Democrats go crazy.
Well, you know,
scare
Paul
grandma.
Ryan was going to destroy Social Security. That's what he was accused of doing.
That's Paul Ryan. He's the guy
charge the
throwing the guy out the cliff
and raise the retirement age. That's what has to happen.
Well, scandalous.
No, well, a couple of things, and again, anecdotal circumstances don't necessarily make for fact, but there's a woman I know who's 64, and she needs a hip replacement. She needs it badly, and she's just waiting till she's,
waiting till she's 65.
Waiting till she's 65, and and she had to wait till she was 67. I don't know if she'd be able to, survive. What I'd like to argue, or I'd like to suggest, there was something I read. I think it was in the Wall Street Journal. Maybe it was,
must be right then.
No, there was a comment that was made, and I wasn't aware of this, that 27% of spending on Medicare
last 2 days of life or something like that,
is spent on the 6% of people who die.
I don't mean to finish your sentences like an old married couple,
Last
so
year,
please go
Okay,
back.
it's spent on the 6% of people who die in any given year. And in many cases, their circumstances are, they can't be cured. They have their life extended, and maybe hospice care as opposed to hospital care would be a better way to go, which is a much cheaper route.
Let me flip that back to you, because your friend that's waiting to see turn 65 to have the hip replacement.
Yeah.
At what age do you stop doing hip replacements? Because after all, we don't want to spend 27% of the money in the last.
Yeah, I know.
You probably need a new hip at 80.
Yeah. So do we do that, or do we, begin to ration it, or is that
that's a good question, Mark. That's a good. That's it.
All right.
No, but I'm saying that's one thing I think we could do, for cuts. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay. We got to cut something. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just for this.
No, I
is
agree,
crazy.
Marty.
I mean, it's like I don't know.
No, I agree. And especially with baby, 1 second before we get back to Michael, with baby boomers, guys like me, guys like you, who are aging,
yes.
Even though we're in
How are your
tremendous
hips,
shape.
Good?
Outstanding.
Mine are a little bigger than usual, but go ahead. We'll get back to the
it's going to be more of a strain upon the system.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a problem.
All right.
A lot of us. Michael,
bring us back
please.
to we're flying around. Give us a pie chart for God's sake.
This is where the revenue comes from in terms of the
a printing press in Washington.
Well, in terms of where what the breakdown is, at least from the tax revenue raised. Most of it, of course, comes from the individual income tax. Some from the payroll taxes, about a third. I want to zero in a little bit on the corporate tax, because there's a lot been said. Our caller said something about GE 0% rate, and I want to
0%, $0.
I want to put a graphic up here.
Next,
because
stay with me right there. Very high.
I get this question a lot in terms of, gee, how can a corporation like that end up not paying any federal income tax? And by way of illustration, I thought the best way to explain this was to put up two corporations side by side, two hypothetical companies here. One that manufactures and one that's service-based. The difference is the manufacturing company, in my example, spends in 2013 $4 million on new equipment. The service company doesn't, just by virtue of the fact that they're not capital intensive.
Right.
Now, in the example I have here, both companies generate $2 million in profit before depreciation and taxes.
On
now,
$20 million in sales.
On one of the provisions that was added by the new tax law is an extension of what's called 50% bonus depreciation on the purchase of new equipment. In other words, the ability to immediately write off 50% of the cost of new equipment and take it as an expense against your taxes. And that applies whether it's your painting company or whether it's General Electric.
Okay.
The same benefits are there. The one benefit that you have that General Electric doesn't is that if you spend up to $500,000 of equipment, new or used, you can write that off in one
but
shot.
But isn't the thinking behind that, this $4 million that they're spending on the new equipment, that's going to actually generate a lot of employment and help stimulate the economy?
Let's dissect that a bit.
Okay.
In this particular situation, that $4 million first of all, that $4 million of equipment had to be purchased from somebody.
Right.
Let's assume it was purchased from another domestic corporation. So obviously there was an economic benefit to that, in that that spawned some demand and generated some revenue.
Right.
Now, the reward in the tax law is this 50% ability to write off the cost of that equipment.
Right.
Well, in this particular example, that write-off essentially zeroes out the profit, and this company pays no tax.
So this is basically GE, take this formula writ large. They got an army of guys like you in really nice suits. And they figure this all out, and they're going to build a plant in here and there and wherever. And
well, they're going to spend $800 million for an expanded appliance facility in Louisville. That's not going to China.
But I'll tell you, they're going to have a ribbon cutting in Louisville.
And they're going to
be happy as you can.
And they're going to get some huge tax benefits.
All right, well, but you know that they're playing by the rules in essence. I mean, it's easy to go, hey, GE didn't pay any corporate tax, and isn't that terrible? I'm getting my taxes go up, but. There's reasons for these tax laws, and they're sort of playing within the rules.
Well, let's look at the impact now on the service company. Let's assume this is a domestic service company.
Which, by the way, that's where the economy is going.
Now, this company is not capital intensive. They're not spending on equipment. They're not getting the write-off as a result. Well, in my example, they're paying $700,000 in tax. That's a 35% rate.
Yeah.
Now, there's been a lot of clamoring, and I said it on this show a couple of years ago, that the corporation tax rate is too high.
39%.
That when you couple the corporation tax rate, the federal rate, with the rate of 27 states in this country, you've got the highest corporation tax rate in the world.
People are fleeing to Canada, the tax
Well,
rate.
but are they? Now, on the flip side,
there was that French actor going to Russia. That's what I'm saying. I mean, when that happens, you cannot get a baguette in Russia last time I checked.
But he can get a 13% tax rate.
That's what I'm saying. So you can fly in the baguettes and you get the tax rate. But I mean,
now, in this particular case, this service company is paying the 35%.
Right.
Now, here's a company, for example, to the extent it can, it probably will try to find a way and shift some of those jobs, some of its business, over to, say, Ireland, where the corporate rate is much lower.
We're talking about the service company now?
The service company.
Okay, so I need to check on my credit card, and all of a sudden someone's got an Irish accent. I put two and two together, and they're doing what you're saying.
Now, the point here is this company obviously feels that the 35% rate is far too high, and it is hindering its ability to compete worldwide.
Right.
So I guess the point here is, where's the happy medium? I mean, the reality of it is, and Larry, you touched upon it before, in the last 5 years, Boeing's corporation rate, 4.5%, Southwest, 6.3%, Yahoo, 7%.
Wait, Southwest Airlines?
Southwest Airlines.
Okay, but Boeing makes planes, Southwest fly them, so there's your manufacturing business.
Well, but what Southwest is doing is, remember, they're buying equipment, they're taking advantage of the write-off.
Right. Okay, all right.
Now, the theory is the write-off too sweet? Yeah. Is it causing businesses to spend unwisely for the sole reason of, well, gee, there is one heck of a tax benefit here. Let's spend maybe even if we really don't need to.
Okay.
But that's been the argument. Now, there's been an argument, some saying, look, the corporation, we can't generate enough corporate revenue. So maybe we need some kind of alternate tax system such that there's a floor at which corporate taxes cannot go below. And one thing this tax law did not do was address the corporate rate. Stay tuned, and we'll see what happens.
Okay. All right, so this basically, they kicked the proverbial can down the street here. It sounds like they kind of did a little bit of nothing. And now we're going to battle this out in the next Congress? Is that basically what
we're going to battle out in 2 months, right, Larry?
Why? Because that's a debt ceiling going on?
That's when the sequestration goes into effect unless...
Suspending their cuts.
Yeah, unless there's some agreement made.
To quote Yogi Berra, it's going to be deja vu all over again?
Yeah.
So, well, all right, let's go down the list here. Larry, we'll start with you. What's going to happen in 2 months? They're going to whack the military, and then are we going to have any real spending reform with the entitlements?
I think it's going to be a problem. I think this guy, Jacob Lew, is going to be very, I think he'll probably be intransigent.
He was Clinton's budget guy, and Clinton seemed to get things under control.
It wasn't as partisan a Congress then as it was now, as it is
Really?
now.
Newt Gingrich and the boys, Contract with America,
control
pretty
both.
goddamn
I
partisan.
understand that.
That's right.
What?
He didn't control both houses.
It was
In
love
94.
and luncheons
The
and
Republicans
picnics.
control both houses. Oh, right.
In 94.
So
It's been
Clinton had to give.
contentious since Thomas
No,
Jefferson.
I understand that, Marty, but I think
But Clinton
now
was more of a pragmatist than Obama.
I think I think
Yes.
now it's more so. I don't know. I mean, I think Obama moved to the. You don't think Obama moved at all?
Well, I
a
know
little bit to the
Clinton
center?
signed Don't
Welfare
Ask, Don't
reform.
Tell. He signed welfare reform.
reform, yeah.
He signed the
Comprehensive
Defense of
welfare
Marriage
reform.
Act.
Yeah,
Forget who it was.
Don't
Someone
ask,
said,
but he certainly
big
moderated.
government is dead. I
The era
forget
of
who
big
that was.
that was Bill Clinton.
There you go.
The era of big government is dead. Yeah.
All right. So, it worked.
But here's the thing.
Embraced Gingrich.
When we get to this
Didn't even
idea
go
of
off the back
spending,
of
will
the
they
thing.
do anything with spending? Because you keep bringing up the social side of it, the woman who needs a hip, the veteran who needs that.
No,
At the end of the day, if the American people were forced to pay for what they're getting, in other words,
Yeah.
this little bump on the top 2% is nothing. We keep saying it. We keep borrowing 1.2 trillion. If Americans' tax rates had to adjust to balance the budget, Democrats would be out of office for a generation, right? If they had to raise everyone's taxes, which they probably should have done. Look, if that's the type of democracy you want, pay for it. But spending cuts, especially getting a hold of the entitlements, is really the answer, especially Medicare. So what they'll probably do is not that much, and they'll keep borrowing. We'll be at 20 trillion by the end of Obama's
My
term.
guess is we'll I don't. Well,
You think so?
no,
20 trillion?
Or are we going to raise the debt ceiling?
From a historical
gonna have to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Perspective, I was reading a book about Ulysses S. Grant, of course,
Yeah.
the famous Union general, and he served 2 terms as president after
Yes.
that. Some say it was a little bit corrupt. I think the guy had the
Big
best
scandal.
of intentions.
Big scandal.
I think he did a heck of a job on
Credit mogul, yeah.
on the Confederate Army. We can give him that. Bobby Lee and the boys got a hurt put on him. But let's leave that alone for now. Okay, it's a long time.
That's
ago.
next week, right?
That's next
We're
week.
all
We'll talk some more.
Americans, man.
But the point was, the big debate then was going off the gold standard. Maybe I don't have my
No, that was
the years right.
late 60s.
Okay, well, even later,
one.
but even back then, they were arguing this same thing.
Well, with silver.
We're spending money
Democrats
too
were fighting
much.
for silver.
We're,
We're
this is
getting
terrible. We're running a
Right.
deficit. I look back in the and I pulled the quote up later, but it was some sort of Roman emperor that says, the city coffers are being depleted. We're running a deficit, and this is all terrible. So I ask myself, now that the election is over, are we really getting hot and bothered over nothing? Was it so bad when we were under the 2 Bushes, say, and we had a $9 trillion deficit, and now that it's up to 16, this is horrific, and 9 was, we can live with that? Is there some politics involved with this, or is it really like we're in big trouble here?
Well, you know what I think it is, Marty. I don't think it's
trouble?
the exact. Well, I don't think it's the exact number. I think it's the percentage of GDP, and it's about, as Michael was saying earlier, it's about 1 to 1. Maybe you're familiar with.
Wait, percentage of GDP, the total deficit?
Debt.
The debt. Okay,
Debt
but
to GDP.
because what they'll say
Debt
is
to
they'll say
GDP.
that the government spending as a percentage of GDP or the deficit as a percentage of GDP is not outlandish. It's a cumulative debt that's getting maybe out of whack.
Well, that's what. Well, I'm talking about the debt, and well, I hate to quote people from Harvard. They made a point that if debt is greater than 90% of GDP, so that's a number, that's a situation the United States would currently be in. It tends to hamper economic growth. So I agree with you, Marty.
And
I really
we
do.
just
Look at
crossed
Japan.
that.
I really do.
Japan's a good example.
Japan, people don't realize 220%. 220%.
Yeah, and I remember. I mean, you go back to the 80s. We thought. I mean, Japan bought Pebble Beach for God's sakes.
I know.
And we thought Japan was going to take over everything. We got to do Japanese management style.
Rockefeller Center.
Small, smart. They're going to own everything. And look at them now. They've been, they still turn out a nice car.
Lost decades.
Well, the last decades in Japan. Yeah.
So are we headed for a lost decade?
What's interesting?
It's beginning to feel that way. This recession has dragged on.
The new president over there, Shinzo Abe, who is the former head. He's going to run a gym.
I had dinner with him.
Yeah. He's going to go print. They're printing money like crazy. Exactly. I mean, the yen has been weakened unbelievably. It's at 88, 89 or so.
But aren't we doing the same thing?
Comparative. I mean, we're printing a lot. Yeah, we're printing a lot.
So
no question.
Shouldn't there be a cautionary tale there?
The difference. Yeah. The difference.
Tell me, what's the difference?
Okay, there's one difference. Well, there's something you should take into account.
We won World War II?
No.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It's that the United States is a reserve currency. That's what you have to take into account, and that people need dollars, and they have to buy, and that they need our currency in order to transact in the oil markets, in order, with gold. And there's always a tremendous demand for our debt, which is not necessarily the case with foreign countries.
Yeah, but we're buying our debt. I mean, China's buying some of it, but we're buying most of it, right?
I was on the show. No, I wasn't on the show, but I was watching it when people called in about what percentage of the debt.
Yeah.
Steve Obsednik, you were talking to him. How did he do, by the way?
I think he came in second.
I think he came in second. What's really factual, it's not that the
many Republicans.
Yeah, I said many Republicans.
My friend Linda, who sat right here. Let's not go there.
We won't go there. It's not so much. It's not that the Fed buys debt. They just essentially snap their fingers.
I've seen them. I saw it on 60 Minutes.
No, it's at the New York
Geithner pushes this key and goes, "We just added $1 trillion to the money."
In reality, that's what it's like at the New York. Yeah.
Lightning round. 10 seconds. What's going to happen?
Minimal spending cuts. I agree with Michael. I agree with Jim. The sequestration will not occur.
So we're on the USS Titanic, iceberg, what iceberg, full speed ahead.
Minimal cuts.
What's going to happen?
They won't deal with entitlement reform because it's the third rail of American politics. They'll talk about defense cuts, but they won't do real defense cuts because they'll start saying, my base, my sub, we make this, we make that, we make helicopters.
Didn't they have like this base closing thing back in Reagan and stuff, and it worked. They need something like that, apolitical.
Yeah, but look at Connecticut, right here. Connecticut's talking about...
Don't touch electric boat, we need that for God's sakes. What are you, some sort of
So multiply that by 50,
The Russians are coming back, we need our subs. What do you say?
We're going to raise the debt ceiling, minimal spending cuts, and I believe our debt is going to be downgraded again.
Ouch. All right, well, we only have one planet. Who are they going to borrow the money from? Listen, I want to thank you so much for coming in. Forgive me for being flippant about some of these things, but sometimes these numbers, I'm more a concept guy. But I'm glad that you guys are out there. I'm glad you're keeping an eye on all this, and I really appreciate you coming in very much.
Pleasure, Marty.
Mike Actus Grande, you can find him in Danbury. He is very well respected. Thank you so much for watching the show, and all of you still recovering. We haven't forgot about you. We're with you. We're a community, and anything we can do to help, we're right here. Join us next week on the Marty Heiser Show, which I don't really have a clue as to what we're going to do next week, but I know it'll be entertaining, and I know it will come to you absolutely free. Marty Heiser Show, where you always get the truth.